Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Transection podcast. It seems like season 1 kind of created itself, and so now we're preparing for season 2, and we had a little natural break in all of our recordings and all of our work. So I'm now just planning season 2. Jordan sends their regards and is busy working a new job at the moment over in Utah.
Hey everyone, Jordan here with a quick little shout out in this episode for you. I have been really busy trying to find a new job and just trying to get back on my feet. It has affected my mental health quite substantially, but thankfully Harris has been awesome and has been keeping this podcast going. So I will be around, I will be back. I am working on getting things better, so please make sure you like and subscribe and make sure that you return, and we have plenty of episodes for you to go back and re-listen, and if you have any ideas for us, please let us know. It was good to talk to you.
So we wish them all their success, and I hope to rope them back into some episodes in the very near future, so it's not the last of them. But so this episode, I was actually interviewed by a lady called Vicky Etherington. I'll tell you all about her in a moment. And I thought it would be good to use our conversation as a bonus episode for those who are interested, and particularly for those of you who are maybe entrepreneurs or professionals, and it might be something useful to take to people that you work with, or maybe your HR department and things like that. And remember to follow us on Instagram at Transection Podcast, or we're on Twitter at Transection P, and we're also on Facebook under the Transection Podcast. A shout out this week to the Watling Street writers, to Elliot Kay, who is helping me put together a speech at the moment, and he's being so patient because I'm going at a snail's pace, as you can tell from when I'm speaking. I've got a bit of anxiety at the moment, so my breathing feels a bit restricted at the moment, but I'm still going, and it's still happening. And yeah, thank you so much for everybody, for your support, your feedback, and all of your engagement, and all of our listeners. And yeah, we couldn't do it without you, and we do it for you. We've had so many lovely reviews, lots of people coming to this subject for the first time, and we really want to keep it light-hearted and educational at the same time. So it seems so far that we're managing to do that. So thank you so much, and I hope you continue to enjoy what we do. If you know anybody who you think would make a really good guest, who's doing work in sort of the social justice arena, or someone who specialises in a certain part of, emotional well-being, we'd be really interested to hear from them. By all means, send us an email or a message and make an introduction, and yeah, definitely up for that. We've got some good guests lined up for season 2 already, and I'm really excited to bring lots of new conversations to you from lots of interesting people. Okay, so a little bit about Vicky. Vicky is a 2-time award-winning website creation coach who has been supporting entrepreneurs in their online marketing and with their websites since 2003. She works with coaches, course creators, and people transitioning into entrepreneurship to teach them how to grow their businesses online and create their own client-attracting websites through her signature Rock That Website program. Her work is about helping people who aren't comfortable with marketing and technology to understand how to create a website which is fully focused on growing their impact and their business, and how to release themselves from any reliance on anyone else. Vicky's really good. So this is the upcoming episode is Vicky interviewing me. So I don't quite manage to squeeze out much from Vicky, because it was sort of me that was in the spotlight for a change. That was kind of weird. But Vicky, she's very modest. She does lots of really cool stuff and knows her stuff really well. She also has a group on Facebook called the WordPress Happy Community. And I really recommend going to join that group. It's free, and she has lots and lots of information and useful live videos and things like that, and engages in that group a lot to help people with their WordPress sites. So I really recommend that you go and speak to her. She always answers my sort of marketing and website kind of questions. And yeah, she's kind of a font of all knowledge in a way. She really knows her stuff. And one thing that she doesn't tell people very often is that her journey actually started out when she was working for a Californian organisation. And I want to say she was in Africa somewhere, but it might have actually been in America. I can't, apologies for not remembering the details. And basically, she's working for this organisation. They didn't have any way of getting a website put together. I think this was very end of the 90s or very beginning of the noughties. And she basically taught herself code, and so she could write a website for her organisation. I don't know if it's a charity or, something along those lines. And yeah, she launched a website from scratch and taught herself coding and everything, and all in what was described as a little bit like the arse end of nowhere. And yeah, she's amazing. She's so lovely and so modest and encouraging, and yeah, obviously I like her. I'm biased. So about this episode, this is what Vicky wrote for the blurb about this interview. She said, "If we aspire to influence positive social change through thoughtful and respectful content, we need to understand inclusive marketing. It enables us to share our message in a way that connects with people from all backgrounds, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, gender identity, age, ability, and so much more. Join me today as I interview Harris Eddiehill, that's me, and explore how we can embark on inclusive marketing and do it better." As just before we play the episode, I just want to remind you about the mailing list, but this time, I have something good for you. I've been putting together this handbook. It's called the Trans Plus Gender Identity Beginner's Guide. And the idea is that if you don't know really anything or much at all about gender identity and the trans plus community and that kind of thing, us lot basically, the idea is that this handbook will explain all of the basics and give it, it's got some visuals, some infographics, and a short glossary. And the idea is that, it's like literally 10 pages long. And the idea is that it will be easy content to consume and understand, and it's relatively basic, and you can take it wherever you go. So you can take it into school or work or any place if it's for you or just your organisation in general, so that you can have some at least rudimentary understanding of what to do. There's a little guide in there, like what to do, the 5 things you need to know when somebody comes out to you about their gender. There's the 3 key questions that you should ask somebody, and a few other little bits. So the idea is that this is free, it doesn't cost you anything, and therefore please sign up to the mailing list if you haven't done already, which is at www.muxharrishill.com/transection, and there's a green box. You just put your name and your email address in there. That's it. It takes 2 seconds. And that PDF, it's just going through final edits now, and it will be out very, very soon, within the next week, I should think. So make sure you sign up for that. So here is the episode, and please enjoy it.
Okay, so we are live. Good morning. And I am here with the fabulous Harris, who is a gender identity educator, and she's going to talk to us today about a little bit about inclusive marketing and what it means and why it's important. And so it's really fabulous to have you here, Harris. Thank you so much for joining us. And actually, I've just seen something from Tiffany, who said yesterday, and I'm only just seeing the comment now, I'm interested in understanding what's meant by inclusive marketing. so I can decide whether or not I need to watch it. It sounds interesting. So, and I didn't reply to her. So anyway, hopefully she'll come along and listen in for herself. So first of all, Harris, tell us where you are, where are you based, and just a little bit about you.
Sure. So hi, Vicky, and thank you for having me on. I live in Hertfordshire usually, although right now I'm in Bolton near Manchester, which is pretty cool. And yeah, I'm a gender identity coach. So I basically talk to, I have an interest in lots of sort of intersectional issues like race and religion and things, but gender identity is my passion and my calling really, to educate people about it. And I'm non-binary. I use they them pronouns, and this is something that came up for me in my mid-20s. I'm in my 30s now, and it was a big surprise. And I think whilst, you know, being part of the sort of trans plus community is sort of difficult, and there's lots of language to get around and concepts and things. When you're one of us, you don't have that sort of vocabulary installed from birth. So like most other adults I know, it's something that even when you're part of the community, you still have to learn about all of this stuff, and the language and how to talk about it and to make sense of things. So I've always been a bit of a bridger. I bridge gaps between different people and different communities and different understandings, and this is my big sort of passion. But I'm a proper introvert, so I never thought I would end up doing anything like this. I had this real dream of being this creative that did lots of different things creatively, like write and paint and things, and I would do it in a studio on my own, and I wouldn't work like directly with people, and they would just sort of pay to like buy my art and my writing, and that would be it. And then so I started running my Genders Together community page on Facebook, which has just about 24,000 followers on there, and I started doing that just a little over 6 years ago.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. Surprising. It's all organic. Like, I've never paid for, I didn't think it would be that big. For me, it was just that I was going through this learning lots about gender, and I posted a few things on my personal Facebook page and annoyed all of my friends. And so I wanted a place, like an outlet, to discuss the topics and learn more without annoying everyone. So I created this page, Genders Together, to explore all of that and meet like-minded people. But I did it anonymously. There was no picture of me. There was no reference to my name or anything at the beginning. And
so can I pick you up on that? I'm interested as to why you did it anonymously. Was that because you weren't sure how it was going to be received? Were you worried about any kind of people picking up on it, people that you knew, or was it just because you genuinely wanted it to just be faceless?
I mean, I think I partly wanted it to be a community, so it wasn't specifically about me. And also, I think there's a little bit of fear of being seen. But I think more than anything, it was just that I wanted to talk about this topic privately, and I didn't want people to know. Excuse me, I just hiccuped. I didn't want people to know, and I think I was not sure how people were going to take it who knew me, and it was a secret. I think only my best friend and maybe one or two other people knew that I had this page. And I was at a networking group, and the director of that area asked me to give a talk. And my business that a lot of people know me from before was as a hair and makeup designer. So she said, why don't you do your talk? It's meant to be business orientated. She said, why don't you do your business talk on like hair and makeup in business? And I was like, I think everyone will be asleep after the first minute. I don't know, like if you're a hair and makeup enthusiast, then fine. But I think the average person doesn't want to listen to that for 20 minutes. So she said, well, what else do you know? And I said, well, I've done talks on like energy vampires and empaths and like lots on like emotional well-being and habit forming and sort of more coaching topics. And I said as a joke, I also run this page on Facebook on gender identity. And she went, yes, that's exactly what you should do. And I was like, oh, shit. And I drove home from that lunch in the car, and maybe some people are also into sort of spiritual things, but I really had this sense of calling and like, this is what you're here to do. And I was like, oh God, really? Is it? All right then. And I didn't want to be that person. I think there's definitely a bit of shame for a lot of people in my community. Like, you want it to be a non-issue. You don't want to be like the goldfish in the goldfish bowl with people like looking in at you. And I was like, oh, I'm going to have to be visible. And it really has taken me a long time to kind of come to terms with that. And as a result of that, I basically outed myself as being this sort of page owner on Facebook with this big following. And this is what we talked about. So
I think that's brilliant. But you see, I wonder because, in fact, if I just pop it up here, Joanna was saying she gets that fear of being seen as an introvert. So Joanna does a lot of work with introverts. So do you think that fear of being seen was actually associated with your gender identity, or do you think it was actually just genuinely because you're an introvert?
Probably more introvert, but definitely the gender identity thing. You know, I've grown up in a very traditional household watching Disney. My sister and I often say, like, bloody Disney, because the number of things that happen in our lives, that it's not that simple, and it's not very romantic or and Disney, you know, obviously we've grown up in the time that we have, and there was nothing about sort of being queer or being trans plus or anything like that. So there's definitely a little bit of fear there as well. And in me coming out about my gender, I was so happy and surprised that so many people had said, like, I have no idea what this is about, but I'm 100% behind you. But unfortunately, for most people in my position, you're always going to find some who are not so kind about it, and they're really having a big reaction of their own. So there is always that little bit of fear. And I'm so lucky that I know so many very liberal and sort of heart-centered people. And actually,
but that's probably a little bit about how you are attracting those kind of people into your life. Do you not think?
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I'm non-judgment is a really big thing for me, and like in a deep way, not just don't say anything, but how I think and how I respond to people. And I mean, you learn that as a coach or as any kind of mental health practitioner, hopefully, that, you know, somebody's ecology, like how they live their life and how they see things, and bless you, and what's important to you. Bless you. And what's important to an individual and how they live their best life could be wildly different from your own, and it's just more important to nurture people than to put your own idea of how they should be on there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that kind of brings us on to how we can actually think about that in our marketing, because what you're probably doing right now for a lot of us is opening up a window to a world that we're not familiar with. And it's not necessarily that we want to shut the door on that world. We're open to it. And I think most of us in my community are pretty liberal minded. But it's just that we don't have access to it necessarily. And so in terms of when we're thinking about it in our marketing, and we're thinking about, you know, if we're wanting to be a greater force for, you know, positive, impactful social change, I think that we genuinely need to start to understand about social marketing, what it means for us. Inclusive marketing. And so I don't know, can you maybe talk to us a little bit about that, and how we can maybe just a thought process that we can go through in order to make sure that we are being inclusive in our marketing?
Yeah, sure. So I meet a lot of really lovely people who say to me, I don't care what somebody is, or like, you know, who they've come out as or whatever. Like, I just want people to be happy, and I think that's such a good place to start. Unfortunately, in our current climate, it's not as simple to just say that, especially when we're talking about marketing, because, so I'll give you an example. I go to my barber's every 3 weeks, and it was a really big fear of mine to go into that barber's, but I have like traditional men's haircuts, and I am very happy with that, and it gives me a big sense of gender euphoria, and I'm like, yes, this is right, this feels brilliant. But it took me a lot of guts to go in there, and I got talking to my barber, and I went to him for like over 3 years, I think. And I said to him, listen, I've got this trans mate, this trans guy. He's going through his transition and everything. He really wants to come into this barber's because he'd seen my haircuts and it looked really good. But he's really scared. Like, are you guys supportive in this shop? And they were like, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't we be? And I said, oh, well, a lot of places, I think you do unfortunately have to make it explicit who you're welcoming, because unless there's explicitly an invitation there for whoever might be within your demographic or your ideal client avatars, people won't come. They won't come because there's no invitation. We don't know that it's safe. We don't know that we're going to be accepted. So it's, of course, all well and good and great that someone says, I support people however they are, but it's not usually enough to just say that. You have to make it explicit, and especially in business as well. And what that means is that you need to take a really good look at your avatar and be really sure about why you're picking gender. So, for example, lots of non-binary people and trans guys give birth to their own babies, right? But there are a lot of mothers groups who talk about postpartum issues and being able to like feed your own baby and things like that. And a lot of those issues are relevant to the non-binary and trans men, non-binary people and trans men who do give birth and do go through that process too, but they're often left out. Now, it's not anybody's intention to leave them out, and I wouldn't necessarily say it was a crime to make those groups, as an example, just for women some of the time. But it is the case that so often my community are left out of conversations, are left out of like coaching groups or marketing in general. For another example is always sanitary items, products. For a long time, and still even in the UK right now, although America has changed, they're very marketed towards women, but obviously there are lots of non-binary people and trans men who also use those products. And we're not talking about 5 people here, we're talking about millions of people worldwide, millions. And I think there is a little bit about building relationships with our clients and people who use our services and buy our products, but also it's about, are you inviting people in? Are they using your services or products reluctantly because they have no other choice? Wouldn't they be better, like happier clients if they knew that they were intentionally included?
Yeah, and supported.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really interesting that you bring those up, because I look at that and I think, and I know that you've said that you don't think it's intentional that they're being excluded. So there's an ignorance issue there. I think for us, for corporates, and for so many different entities, I think that a lot of that probably boils down to the fact that they genuinely do not see that community. And that's not because they're not wanting to see it. It's just they don't have exposure to it. And so I think it's really interesting. So I love the fact that you are bringing this as an educator to people's attention. And I know we've talked specifically about gender, but actually it's not just gender that we're talking about, is it? Yeah. In terms of inclusive marketing, we could be talking about age, we could be talking about race, we could be talking about religious inclinations, whatever it might be. Actually, this inclusivity is all encompassing. And it's not, I know gender is obviously, that's your area that you really focus on, and that's where you're educating people. But actually, this should be opening our eyes to the fact that there are groups of people, there are communities who feel as though they're not seen.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, you can look at, if you look at adverts on like daytime TV and things like that, that's improved massively. Now you've got banks who in their adverts, they use like same-sex couples of varying ethnicities and things like that. And it's all about like, how can a client picture themselves as a client of yours, potentially, if they never see themselves in your marketing. So in photo shoots that I used to take part in for people's businesses and things like that, a lot of the extras were white. And you know, there is and this is a really important thing, is that your marketing is only the beginning of a client's journey with you. So your marketing has to be reflected throughout the rest of your client journey. So in your marketing, you might have pictures of people of different ages, different genders, different sort of presentations, ethnicities, and everything else. But those values can't be tokenistic. It can't be the invitation at the beginning, and then they get further down the journey and actually find that it was just a ploy to get them in. So Starbucks is a big one. Starbucks in America particularly made a really big commitment to look after all of their trans employees and to make sure that their trans employees got access to all their healthcare covered under Starbucks health insurance for employees. Which is great, and they actually attracted a lot of trans people applying for positions in their shops, in their cafes, only to find that actually for many people they were suffering a lot of transphobia at work, and they weren't supported. And even a lot of the managers were, at best, they were a bit ignorant and didn't really have the support or the education to look after their new employees. And in some cases, it was just, you know, downright discrimination and quite nasty. So marketing is absolutely where it starts. But I think for it to be really genuine and authentic marketing, it needs to follow on from there. It can't just be on the surface, sort of skin deep. It really needs to be well-rounded and really available to your clients throughout their whole process with you.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting because I think a lot of what you're saying now runs in parallel with this surge that we've seen of interest in the Black Lives Matter and all of those campaigns, because people are talking a lot more about inclusivity of different races and ethnicities in their marketing and about that user journey. That, like you say, it can't just be tokenism. It can't just be something that we talk about in our marketing and then not include it throughout the rest of their customer journey with us. And so it might be, and I'm speculating here, but what I'm thinking is that as we open our eyes more to the Black Lives Matter, I want to say kind of movement, then maybe this opens the door for other areas where there has traditionally been, I don't want to say discrimination, but maybe ignorance. And it can literally just be this opening of a window where we can look in and say, do you know what, we should be doing this better. We haven't been thinking about it before. It's hardly even crossed our radar, and now we need to embrace it, and we need to work with it, and we need to educate ourselves, we need to educate our teams, and we need to just start paying it the attention that it deserves, and learning from people like you who are trying to open our eyes to it and trying to educate us about it. And what I really like, not only about the community that you've got, Harris, because you do a lot of stuff with kids and teens as well, don't you?
Mm.
Because that's where the real change is going to happen, I think. And I think that not just in gender identity, but I think in race discrimination or other areas where we've had our eyes closed to it, I think if we can open the eyes of our children to it and we can bring them up in a way that is more inclusive, then that's where we're going to have an impact.
Yes, I think from my experience, certainly when I've gone to do workshops about gender identity specifically in secondary schools, the experience of educating kids between the ages of 11 and 18 is so different. You get the 11-year-olds who don't seem to be particularly self-conscious, or they're not at an age where status has necessarily become a thing like it is with the other end at the 18-year-olds. And one of the questions I love to ask in the workshops is, how does society currently define like differences between men and women? And you get the 11-year-olds that all just shout willies or something, and I just love that. I think that's so funny. But then you get to like the older ones and they're all like nudging each other, they don't want to ask, and they're becoming self-conscious. So you're right, like educating kids about how different we can all be and how different they might be, to save them years of confusion and being in a closet, which is psychologically quite damaging, is really important. And getting them young is much easier. They're so quick. I mean, I was doing these workshops for like half an hour per class in the past when I've worked with teenagers and secondary schools. And that really is most of what they need. They just need to know that it's normal and that people like us are around, and that they actually could be one of them. Nobody ever told me like, you might be queer, you might be trans or something. So when it happened, it was such a shock. And because although I hadn't grown up in a house where somebody had like made fun of it or said anything bad, equally we hadn't had any good conversations. So I thought, well, either they don't know about this or this is bad, or I can't say it. And like I mentioned before, like the statistics say that it's a large number of people. This is not a needle in a haystack. Even for our generations and older, it's a minimum of 1% of the population. So if you've got 450 friends on Facebook, which I think is the average, that's 4 or 5 people.
Yeah.
So at least, and it could be more. I mean, my friends list, as you can imagine, is very colourful. However, I think it's really important, if we want those like young people to carry that forward, we need to make sure that they're actually supported as well, and that they're not constantly sort of fighting when they get home or fighting when they get to work. Because, I mean, I'm lucky, like my mum particularly is really supportive, and she, she was born in the 60s, and she's done a lot of growing and learning with me, and that's been great. But even so, like, being, aside from the fact that I'm an educator, like the rest of the time I'm a regular human who doesn't like mornings and is just thinking about regular things. And to be the educator within your social circle as well, just for existing, is quite difficult. And I think that we as adults and older generations really need to take a little bit of an interest. You don't need to dedicate your life to it like I have. You don't need to go to marches necessarily or anything like that, but just to be aware and not to put the burden on young people, because so often they're the ones that are coming home and teaching this new attitude and these new words, which is fine to a certain extent. But I do think that we as adults need to take some responsibility of learning these things, and not saying like, oh well, when the next kids, by the time they're in charge, things will be better. Like, I do, like, a lot of my education, and actually the people who need me the most and spend the longest with me, are adults, and older adults as well.
Yeah. Joanna is saying, how do we intentionally include non-binary and trans people? I think that goes back to the conversation about the barber. How should that barber let people know that they are welcomed and they are safe in that environment?
Okay. Well, you can do so for the barbering situation in particular. I had this conversation with my barber, and he's a senior barber. I think he's a director now. And then he had a word with his team, and they're a chain of shops. And after that, excuse me, hiccups again. After that, they had some conversations about it, and they have then posted on social media and become a little bit more like voiced their support a lot more often.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're doing haircuts, so it's not, it's a different kind of service. For the rest of us, I would say, particularly in the sort of coaching and entrepreneurial world, we should really be thinking about our avatars. Who are we marketing to, and why? And does it need to be gendered in the first place? I think that's one thing. Or are we talking about a particular person who's going through a particular thing? You know, like I gave examples earlier of like childbirth. We can talk about childbirth and we don't need to gender it, and that way it automatically includes everybody. And also to make it explicit, to say out loud, like, I support these people and I will serve you, and I will be aware of how you might use my services or products differently. But for example, if you're selling like a product about you know, click funnels or something, it really doesn't matter. You don't have to go into the deep stuff about gendering things and being inclusive. You can just say this is for everyone. You know, you don't have to even make it more specific. And I think people who are in the habit of making gender specific to what they're doing think, oh, I have to start like listing out all of these different genders, where actually you don't have to at all. You can just talk about your subject. So like a menopause coach, I know I'm giving a lot of biological examples, but just to make it more easy.
Yeah, no, it makes it real.
But like a menopause coach, you can say menopause. Lots of people go through menopause, and not just women, and even, you know, some women don't go through menopause at all. They might be on HRT, or they may never have had a cycle to begin with. Like it's so individual. So really, if we're talking about menopause, that just automatically includes everybody. And then,
did you know what? So I honestly, I love that you're saying that, and I love that you're using the biological examples. And the reason for that is, I'm kind of ashamed to hold up my hand and say, if I was speaking to a menopause coach, it would never have crossed my mind for me to say to them, you know, you need to be inclusive with this, because you're not only just speaking to females, and that's my stuff that I have to deal with, you know, and I have to accept the fact that I've been really blinkered on that. But I also recognize that I'm probably not the only person who has been blinkered in this. And so the examples that you're giving of things like childbirth, menopause, breastfeeding, all those kind of things, it had not crossed my radar that we needed to be speaking to a trans community, or you know, it's just my pure ignorance. So I love that we're having this conversation, and I'm hoping that there are going to be people who are watching this who can also take something from this. And you know, even if they don't necessarily actively act on it, I would love for it to be planting a seed for them, so that they can recognize that there is an exclusion that had been a blind spot for them.
Definitely. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. And I think it's important to mention that all of us, including me, has gone through this very sort of awkward stage of being an amateur as an adult, and adults don't like being amateurs at anything. Kids, when you're little, you're learning, and you're often in environments where it's accepted that you don't know something. That's why you go to school, and everybody around you teaches things. But it seems like, I don't know what the magic age is, that we're meant to know everything and be like really cool and smooth about things. But adults, like, they feel so apologetic for not knowing. And I think that when I'm teaching and coaching people, that's actually one of the biggest things that we deal with, is this sense of like, I'm ignorant and I don't know how this works, and like, I feel terrible about it. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, Brené Brown says that guilt is good because guilt motivates people to change.
Yeah.
But also, like, I just think people will often say to me when they're talking to me, and they might mess up with using my neutral pronouns and things like that.
I did
Or
at the
like,
beginning. Apologize for that.
but and they've said like, I'm so sorry. They're so worried about it, and I think that's so sweet. But I've said to them so many times, like, so long as I know that you accept me and that you're trying, like, that to me is so exciting, and I love that. Like, and my real concern is that I'll come across somebody who says something really horrible, or like really rejects me, or is really unkind, and that has happened to me more than once. And for some people, depending on what country they live in or what society they live in, that can be really terrible. And actually, a lot of people, if they're in countries where it's illegal and they, put people to death, then obviously they wouldn't even share that in the first place.
Yeah.
So not only are we doing all of these things from like an ethical and a business point of view, because also it's important to mention that we are an underserved market. A lot of what we're using, we're having to use it like reluctantly, or like, well, this is all I've got. These are my only options. But having that inclusion and it being like really deep and really authentic and really strengthen those relationships that you have with customers, and also provide for them like a breath of fresh air. Like, for me to go out to get food, like if I'm going to a restaurant, or if somebody's talking to me at a supermarket, I get misgendered all the time, and I accept that that's the society that we live in and that people are going to see me a certain way. So I've made my peace with it, but on the occasions that doesn't happen, it makes my day. It absolutely makes my day, and people that I work with as well. And I think it's okay to be ignorant, so long as you're aware that you're ignorant and that you are making small and gradual steps to learn a little bit more at a time. And it doesn't take that much. Like, you don't, like you said, like planting a seed and starting to think about it is probably half of the battle.
Yeah. But just having conversations like this and being open to having conversations like this. Oh, there's feedback. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think even just being open to having conversations and just, having people like you in our lives and in our community, it's a big deal for us who want to educate ourselves. And I think most people do genuinely want to educate themselves. They just haven't necessarily had someone like you cross our path yet, who is willing to take the time to help us and help us get better and to open our eyes. So Joanna's saying definitely a blind spot for me. I seem to attract mainly female clients, but didn't set out to do that. Yeah, Joanna, I'm the same. I have probably about 95% of people in my community are female. Quite a lot of that is about branding. So on my last Rock That website, I only had one guy, and he was like, I feel a little bit outnumbered here. But I think, there's, like I say, a lot of that is about branding, but a lot of it is going to come down to messaging as well. And also, how we're portraying ourselves and how open we are to having other genders within our community. So, okay, so Harris, is there anything that you wanted to cover off today that we haven't talked about yet?
I think we've covered like the important parts. Also, I think you can get a lot of this information just by listening to people talk about it. So there's a few recommendations that I would make. First of all, there's Disclosure on Netflix, which is an amazing piece, a documentary by Laverne Cox. She played the trans character in Orange is the New Black. And sorry?
Will you send that to me? Will you remind me, and will you remind me that in that message?
Let me write it down. So yeah, that's on Netflix, and that talks a lot about trans people, the last 100 years of trans people's representation in Hollywood. And it's not just about films. There's a lot of personal sort of stuff in there, and it's a lot of people sort of willing to share some really deep stuff, and it's just such an amazing piece, so educational and heartfelt, and I just think it's stunning. Also, there are lots of podcasts out there which are really good, and I hope that mine is counted in that number. It's free to listen. It's called the Transection podcast, and it's on like every platform. I've tried to like spam the internet with it, so it's lots of fun. It's not for children, 18 plus only, please. We talk about lots of important things, not just gender stuff, but we've talked about like I talked to a Sufi business healer, and I talked to the inclusive screenwriter on there, and we also I co-host every other episode usually with my trans buddy Jordan, and we talk a lot about our experiences growing up and our relationships with religion and how that worked out. Jordan's story is like incredible. Jordan grew up in a Mormon kind of religious cult. It was next level, and so some of it's heavy, but a lot of it we're very silly. There's definitely some ripe humour, so if you're into that, then go for it. I always think it's, if you can make learning fun and maybe a bit naughty, then it sticks a bit more.
Did you call it, I'm going to put it up on the screen, is that what it is? Transection podcast?
Transection podcast, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
And there are lots of good things out there. Like I'm not suggesting that anybody starts dedicating their lives to a cause, because we have to be realistic and live our lives, but there are lots of little things out there you can do over time. Like, don't beat yourself up for not knowing, but if you do feel that little niggle of like, oh, I feel that this is something I should sort of approach and maybe do something about, it will take a long time, but if you've got a good attitude and you're open about where you are in that learning and what you have learned, and educate people when they're being a bit unkind, or maybe hold people to account, like these are all little things that we can do to show our support. And change, it happens with all of us. Change has to include lots and lots of people. So and there are some pretty worrying statistics just to finish off. 48% of trans youth attempt suicide, so that's one really big reason that I do what I do. It's not just to kind of promote a lifestyle or to make sure people are included as some kind of token. Like it really is important that we look after each other and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to thrive, and to do that we all need to be a little bit involved.
Yeah, that's an unbelievably horrifying story. It literally gave me goosebumps when you said that. It's nearly 1 in 2 children. That's horrendous. So, and also, we hear lots about hate crimes. It's not just mental illness, is it? It's about educating other people. And like you were saying, it's about standing up for what we believe is right as well. And again, to draw a parallel with the Black Lives Matter, we've been hearing lots more about that, and about how we should be truly standing up for what we believe when we hear people who are saying things that are not, they're not okay. So, okay, was that the only statistic you wanted to share with us?
I've got more, but yeah, I think that's the important one. That's the important one that we, and one other one is that transphobia affects trans women of color more than anybody else, and their current life expectancy, at least in the US, I think is 37 years old.
So that is horrifying.
Yeah, so I mean, whilst the general public are not going around committing these hate crimes like you and me or whatever, and like people that we know, in order for those to change, like those of us who are kind, maybe a little bit unsure, maybe a bit ignorant, like we can all make a massive difference with these statistics by joining in and listening and learning a lot more, and making positive change, and making sure that we're all growing in this way.
Yeah. So Harris, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us about this today. I think you've got a resource that we can download, have you?
Yes, it's at www.muxharrishill.com/PDF. It's a little it's a little PDF. It'll come out this week. So if you sign up there, then you'll get it this week. It will be sent through. It's short. It's got all the information that you could need, and I'll also do a little video explaining and like walking you through it. So, and that's all free. So go and get it, spread it around if you want to, like send it to other people. If you've got friends in HR or who are teaching or anything like that, then or maybe you know some parents. I support a lot of parents of trans kids. Maybe they need a bit of info to start off with, and it's free and it'll be free forever. And
that's
go
awesome.
for it.
Thank you so much. That's fabulous. Let me just check that we haven't got any other questions. Joanna says Harris has been a great guest, so thank you. Steph says love a bit of ripe humor. I've seen some of your humor in action, Harris, so I know that there'll be some good little tidbits in there. Steph is saying so sad. Joanna saying shocking. Those statistics are really hard hitting. So thank you. This has been such a different kind of episode. Normally we come in on a Tuesday and we're having people talk about lead magnets or lead generation or whatever else it is. So it's been, genuinely, it has been a breath of fresh air. It's been a real eye-opener for me. And I will make sure that I specifically mention this on my next email that goes out, because I think it's so valuable. There's so much in here that I think people really genuinely need to hear. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time coming on today.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Bye for now, guys.
So there you go. That was me in the spotlight for a change, not grilling somebody else. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. I hope it was informative and that there were some things in there that have left you with something to ponder. If you have any questions, of course, you can contact us via social media or the website, muxharrishill.com. And thanks very much. We've got some good guests, as I mentioned before, coming up. And I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of the guests and also to Jordan. And I guess myself, I should be grateful to myself. It sounds weird, doesn't it? But for season 1, I was so happy with it. And so many people have come back and said how much they learned from season 1 and how much fun it was as well. I know that we talked about some serious stuff, but I hope it was, delivered in a way that was fun to listen to and everything. And that seems to be everyone's feedback, so I'm really chuffed with it. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming on this journey with us. It sounds corny, but it's true, and I mean it. So and just a reminder, you can also sign up directly for the PDF that I mentioned before at www.muxharrishill.com/PDF. That's easy to remember, isn't it? And that will be out very soon. Just to remind you, if you're dealing with any gender-related stuff at home, work or school, please get in touch via the website or social media, and me and my team will see if we can help you. There's lots of things out there, free or easy. We can chat about it for sure. I'm here to support you. It's becoming my job, like full time, and I'm very passionate about it. And I want everyone to do well and navigate this sort of area of life, particularly, and do it well and make sure that everyone's having the best possible time that they can have. So until then, until the next episode, which will be episode 1 of season 2, which is very exciting. Until then, build bridges and have fun.